The Galactic Academy was no ordinary place of learning. It was an institution known across the stars as the crucible for shaping the galaxy's finest warriors, tacticians, and survivalists. Students from dozens of species were handpicked and brought together to train not only in advanced combat, but also in the art of adaptation. The training hall itself reflected this philosophy, vast, metallic, lined with alien machinery, and humming with energy. Every wall was outfitted with scanners, every ceiling light with sensors, recording each move and measuring every choice. On that particular day, the atmosphere inside the hall was charged with an unusual tension. The instructor, a being with multifaceted eyes and voice like a rasping insect, stood at the center of the chamber. His mandibles clicked as he announced the task. Your assignment is simple: build a weapon. You have 3 hours. The materials you need are before you. What you create will reflect not just your skill but your way of thinking. At once, the chamber erupted into motion. The reptilian craft immediately slithered to the metallic crates, clawed hands sorting through coils, alloy fragments, and magnetic plates. Their minds, shaped by a civilization that had perfected rail technology, gravitated toward building a miniature rail gun, something sleek, fast, and devastating. Sparks flew as they welded components together with precise efficiency. Nearby, the Elthari, amphibious beings whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent veins, pulled apart plasma conduits and energy regulators. With delicate, webbed fingers, they assembled a weapon that could channel raw energy into destructive bursts. They were perfectionists, whispering calculations, recalibrating angles, and debating thermal output, even as the glow of their project brightened the room. The insectoid T-Chick moved with a flurry of activity that blurred their many arms. They unraveled razor, thread from the crates, weaving it into a deadly lattice. To the T-Chick, elegance meant complexity. Their weapon was meant to ensnare, slice, and devastate with surgical precision. The hiss of their threads slicing through the air sent shivers through nearby students. Other species contributed their own approaches. Some preferred ranged weaponry, crafting bows enhanced by magnetic accelerators. Others leaned toward defensive tools, shields capable of refracting laser fire or drones programmed for autonomous strikes. The hall transformed into a symphony of innovation. Soldering sparks, electrical hums, metallic clanks, and the hiss of cooling systems filled the air. Every corner glowed with the brilliance of advanced science, each weapon more complex than the last. But amidst the storm of activity, one figure remained curiously still. The human, seated at the far corner of the chamber, did not rush toward the crates of exotic metals or glowing plasma coils. Instead, he sat quietly in his chair, arms folded, observing. Some students glanced at him with confusion, even disdain. Was he frozen? Was his species too primitive to understand the assignment? The instructor noticed too but said nothing, letting the silence of the humans in action hang in contrast with the frenzy of innovation surrounding him. This was part of the test: who would lean on their culture's technology, and who would rely on something deeper. The challenge wasn't merely about weapon making, it was about thought. In the Academy's philosophy, the weapon was not just a tool but a reflection of the wielder. To some, it was a chance to show technical mastery. To others, it was proof of their race's superiority in engineering. But the human, he seemed to approach it differently. The alien students didn't know it yet, but while they sought perfection through complexity, the human was about to demonstrate something entirely different: survival through simplicity. The room, at that moment, was a stage of contrast, dozens of alien minds racing toward height, brilliance, while one quiet figure sat with nothing more than an ordinary chair. The question lingering in the air wasn't who would build the most powerful weapon. It was who would build the most effective one, and in that silence the seeds of the lesson were planted. As the hours ticked on, the alien students grew more engrossed in their projects. The training hall buzzed like a forge of ideas, alive with plasma arcs, whirring servos, and sharp metallic clangs. Every weapon being built looked like something out of a battlefield centuries ahead of its time. Sleek, precise, and frighteningly lethal. And then there was the human. While the others soldered, calculated, and engineered, the lone human simply stood up from his chair. His boots echoed lightly against the metallic floor as he pushed the chair back and studied it, tilting his head as though appraising it not as furniture but as potential. With a sudden, sharp movement, he planted his foot on the seat, gripped one of the legs with both hands, and wrenched. Crack! The sound of splintering would cut through the hole like a gunshot. Conversations halted. Sparks flickered and dimmed as tools were lowered. Dozens of alien eyes turned toward the human, who now held a broken chair leg in his hands. For a moment the galaxy's most brilliant students stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the act they had just witnessed. The human rotated the chair leg slowly, testing its weight and balance. He ran a thumb over the jagged splinters at one end, then simply lifted his head and declared, "This is a spear." The silence shattered with mocking laughter. The Ilthari's gills, lids fluttered as he choked back his amusement. "A stick. Truly, we harness plasma, and you choose wood." The Krath hissed, their serpentine tail lashing against the floor. "Primitive nonsense that won't even scratch my scales." Even the insectoid tea-chick, usually reserved, let out a series of clicking chirps that translated as laughable, prehistoric. But the human did not flinch. He didn't look embarrassed or ashamed. Instead, he leaned casually against his makeshift weapon, tapping it against his shoulder like a soldier at ease. "You've got it wrong," he said evenly. "It's not just a stick. It's the oldest weapon our species has ever known. We've used this to hunt, to fight, to defend. Long before circuits, before plasma, before railguns, there was the spear." Some of the aliens exchanged puzzled glances. Their cultures had long outgrown such things. For them, technology wasn't just advancement. It was identity. To choose something so simple seemed almost insulting, as though the human was spitting on the very idea of progress. But the human wasn't done. He lifted the spear, pointing its jagged end toward the air. "You build weapons that depend on your technology. Batteries, magnets, cooling systems, precision parts. If they break, they're useless. My weapon, it doesn't break. It doesn't overheat. It doesn't require a power cell. It just works, always." He thrust the spear forward, the sudden movement so sharp and controlled that several students instinctively recoiled. The splintered edge stopped a mere inch from Krath's thick scales. The reptilian blinked, its tongue flicking nervously. The human grinned. "See, doesn't need to pierce your shields. It only needs to pierce you, and trust me, it will." The instructor's mandibles clicked softly, his multifaceted eyes glittering with intrigue. Unlike the students, he wasn't laughing. He understood what was happening. The human had taken the challenge not as an engineering test, but as a survival test. He wasn't trying to outbuild the others. He was showing them what it meant to strip a problem down to its essence. While others chased complexity, the human embraced simplicity. Where the others trusted their inventions, the human trusted himself. In that moment, the broken chair leg was no longer just a piece of wood. It was a symbol of something the Academy had almost forgotten. That true power doesn't always come from advanced circuits or high energy output. Sometimes it comes from instinct, raw practicality, and the refusal to overcomplicate survival. The aliens laughed less loudly after that. Some didn't laugh at all. Because deep down, a dangerous thought had crept into their minds. What if he's right? The training hall had shifted in atmosphere. Moments ago, it was filled with confidence and superiority, every alien student certain that their advanced designs were unmatched in brilliance. But now After the human's declaration, there was an uneasy ripple running through the class. The Krath adjusted the components of their railgun nervously, though they tried not to show it. The Elthari pretended to ignore the human, focusing on their plasma conduit, but their gills, lids fluttered faster than usual, betraying agitation. The T-Chick's delicate weaving of razor thread slowed, the rapid click of their mandibles falling silent for long intervals. The human's spear had not been built with finesse, nor with glowing energy cores, nor with elegant circuitry. It was just a broken chair leg, and yet the calm confidence with which he held it carried weight. The instructor observed this dynamic with quiet satisfaction. He had seen it before, the clash of philosophies when cultures collided. The alien students represented societies that had evolved past brute tools, civilizations that measured advancement by how far they distanced themselves from their primal pasts. The human, however, was unashamed of his origins. He embraced them, wielding the primitive as though it were sacred. The Elthari finally broke the silence. Your logic is flawed. A stick can be thrown, yes, but so can plasma. Our weapons extend range, maximize precision, guarantee lethality. Your weapon is crude. The human tilted his head. You're right, it is crude, but tell me this, what happens if your plasma regulator overloads? The Elthari's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. The human continued, what happens if your rail gun coil cracks mid-battle, or if your razor thread jams its spools? He raised the chair leg, twirling it lightly in his hands. This won't fail. It doesn't rely on perfection. It only relies on me. The Krath hissed, you assume too much of yourself. The human smiled faintly. No, I assume enough. Humans don't survive because we're the fastest or strongest. We survive because we adapt. If the environment changes, we change with it. If the tools break, we make new ones, and when nothing is left. He thrust the spear again with startling force. We fight with whatever we have. The words hung heavy in the air. For the aliens, war had become an extension of science, a showcase of their species' brilliance. For the human, war was stripped to its bones. Kill or be killed, survive or perish. The instructor finally stepped forward, his shadow stretching long across the hall. Do you see, students, this is contrast in its purest form. You think of weapons as machines, he thinks of weapons as extensions of survival. His mandibles clicked in approval. And do not mistake his simplicity for weakness. A spear killed predators before your ancestors walked upright. A spear shaped civilizations before your species invented words. And in the hands of one who knows survival, it is still as deadly as your plasma conduits. The students shifted uneasily. Some were defensive, clinging to their pride. Others felt the sting of truth. The T-Chick finally spoke, their mandibles snapping sharply. But surely complexity outpaces simplicity. Given time, a razor thread will always best a stick. The instructor's eyes gleamed. And yet, what if the battlefield strips away your complexity? What if you awaken with nothing but your own body and the environment around you? Who survives then? His gaze swept across the room, finally settling on the human with the spear. The contrast could not have been sharper. Shimmering, humming weapons of science versus a piece of splintered wood. But that was the lesson, not in power, not in brilliance, in resilience. For the first time, the alien students weren't sure who would walk away victorious if these weapons were tested in combat. And the human, leaning calmly on his chair-leg spear, seemed to know exactly what they were thinking. The lesson deepened with each passing moment. What had started as a simple assignment, build a weapon, was no longer about craftsmanship alone. It had become a mirror for philosophy. The alien students prided themselves on sophistication. Their weapons glowed, whirred, and pulsed with lethal brilliance. Yet, deep down, a crack was beginning to show in their certainty. The human's chair-leg spear mocked everything they believed about superiority. The Krath, coiling their serpentine tail tighter, finally spoke. Our weapons are designed for precision warfare, not for crude improvisation. In battle, sophistication ensures dominance, superior range, superior firepower, superior control. The human leaned on his spear and shook his head. No, sophistication ensures dependence, dependence on parts, on power, on maintenance. Strip those away, and you're left with nothing but an idea that no longer works. Survival doesn't care about how advanced you look. It only cares if you're still breathing when the fight is over. The Elthari tried to counter, but complexity brings options. A plasma weapon can disintegrate armor, scorch terrain, intimidate enemies. A simple stick cannot. The human's eyes hardened. A stick can kill. That's all it needs to do. One strike, one thrust, and the fight is decided. You think survival is about intimidation. We think survival is about finality. The instructor, who had been silent, interjected with a rasping chuckle. Do not underestimate the power of finality, young ones. I have seen war across 100 worlds. Sophisticated weapons win battles, until they fail. Primitive weapons, they are eternal. Fire, stone, wood, metal, they endure. The human nodded in agreement. My ancestors didn't conquer their world with plasma or coils. They survived with stones, bones, and sharpened wood. We threw spears at mammoths, at predators twice our size, and when the spears broke, we sharpened more. Sophistication isn't what makes a species survive. Endurance does. Adaptability does. Simplicity ensures both. The hall grew quiet again. The words cut deep because they revealed a weakness none of the students had ever considered. Their weapons were monuments of brilliance, but also monuments of fragility. If stripped of their forges, their power cells, their engineering bays, could they fight at all? The T-Chick clicked their mandibles nervously, but surely progress must mean leaving behind the primitive. Why else invent plasma conduits? The instructor tilted his head. Because progress offers convenience, not immortality, do not mistake the two. He gestured to the human. This one reminds you of a truth your ancestors knew. When stripped of progress, the primitive keeps you alive. The human grinned faintly. Sophistication can be impressive. I won't deny that. But when you're cornered, bleeding, starving, and you're high, heck, rifle jams, you'll wish you had a stick, or a rock, or a sharp piece of metal. Anything that simply works. A long pause filled the hall. The alien students were no longer laughing. Their minds churned with the implications. Survival was not about who had the brightest plasma or the strongest coil gun. It was about who could keep fighting when everything else was gone. The instructor's voice rose, resonating through the chamber. This is the lesson of survival over sophistication. It is not the brilliance of your weapon that saves you. It is the will of the one who wields it, and the simplicity of the tool that endures when brilliance fails. The students lowered their eyes, each confronted by a quiet, uncomfortable truth, and the human, resting his spear across his shoulders, looked utterly at ease, because for him survival wasn't a lesson. It was instinct. The instructor had remained quiet for most of the challenge, allowing the students' debates to unfold. His mandibles twitched softly, and his compound eyes flicked between each species, recording their arguments, watching their egos rise and their certainty falter. But when the human lifted the broken chair leg and spoke with such unshakable confidence, the instructor felt something stir deep in his memory. He had seen this before. Many rotations ago, long before this cohort had entered the academy, he had witnessed humans on the battlefield. Fragile-looking creatures, skin soft and bodies comparatively weak beside the armored Krath, the scaled Ilthari or the exoskeleton-armored T-Chick. By logic alone, they should have been the first to fall. But they never were. He remembered one skirmish vividly, an outpost raid on a frozen moon. The power cells of half the garrison's weaponry froze, energy regulators shattered in the sub-zero cold. Soldiers of other races panicked, abandoning their positions. And yet the humans improvised. They ripped piping from the walls, broke frozen panels into shards, sharpened fragments of scrap. They fought not with plasma, but with desperation and creativity. When the dust settled, it was the humans who had held the line. The instructor's mandibles clicked in a slow rhythm, the sound echoing through the training hall. "Do you understand what you have just witnessed?" he finally said, his voice low but carrying. His gaze swept across the alien students, who sat stiff with unease. "You see only a stick, but I see something far older, far deadlier." The Ilthari blinked, confused. "Deadlier than plasma?" "Yes." The instructor's voice sharpened. "Because it is not the weapon that is deadly. It is the mind that wields it. And humans think differently. While you calculate, they act. While you hesitate to preserve your fragile technology, they adapt. While you perfect a tool, they perfect survival." He paced slowly around the circle of students, his insectoid legs clicking against the metallic floor. "You laugh because you measure strength in brilliance, but brilliance is a fragile flame, a gust of wind. No power, no resources, no time, and it goes out. Yet survival is not fragile, it is stubborn, it is brutal, and it will outlast every shining invention you cherish." The Krath coiled tighter, still skeptical. "You speak as though one primitive stick could outmatch our weapons." The instructor turned sharply toward him. "I have seen it. I have fought it. On worlds where technology fails, when gravity pulls harder than your alloys can withstand, when storms fry circuitry, your sophisticated designs become useless. And do you know who survives then? The ones who can pick up a rock and make it a hammer. The ones who can break a branch and make it a spear. The humans." The room fell utterly silent. The instructor clicked his mandibles again, leaning closer to the group. "Do not mistake simplicity for weakness. Simplicity is purity. It strips away everything unnecessary until all that is left is the instinct to kill, to endure, to continue. That is why humans have survived plagues, wars, and extinctions. They endure not because they are the strongest, but because they are the most unwilling to die." The students shifted uneasily. For the first time, their pride in their advanced weapons felt fragile. The human only rested his spear across his shoulders and smirked. He didn't need the instructor's praise. He already knew. For his kind, this was not revelation. It was reality. The instructor straightened, his voice rising so all could hear. "Learn from this. Your weapons may dazzle, but when the battlefield strips everything away, only one truth remains. The simplest weapon, in the hands of the most adaptable, will always outlast the most complex invention." His gaze returned to the human. "This is why I say, ever underestimate them.